Warning, this video contains very disturbing subject matter and also graphic imagery. If you are sensitive to topics such as death, eating disorders, drug abuse, domestic violence, child abuse, sexual abuse, war and disfigurement, please do not watch this video as this video contains all of those topics. Hey everyone, welcome back to yet another PSA Iceberg. So after my most recent iceberg did extremely well, like ridiculously well, I've decided to do another iceberg. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about the most obscure PSAs, as there are a lot of PSAs that aren't really talked about at all or even well known in the slightest. Also, at the start of each of the 5 tiers, I'll explain each tier and how obscure the PSAs are in that tier. But anyways, before we get into the iceberg, I want to quickly mention my Patreon again, as I've added a new $2 tier and also some new benefits for you all. If you want to get a shout out at the end of my videos and receive awesome benefits that no other PSA enthusiast has, such as early access to my videos, please make sure to check out my Patreon in the description, as you can receive a shout out at the end of each of my videos with as little as $2 with my new Patreon tier called the PSA Pirate. You'll receive a shout out at the end of my videos as well as an exclusive Discord tier. With that out of the way, let's talk about the most obscure PSAs. Tier 1. Not that obscure. So these are the PSAs that aren't really seen as obscure at all in a PSA enthusiast's eyes. But these PSAs may seem obscure to people that haven't really gone into PSAs or gone down the PSA rabbit hole at all. But we shall get into the entries. Don't play with trains. Don't Play with Trains is a PSA campaign from the government of South Australia, which was released sometime during the 2000s. The whole campaign is telling people to be careful around trains. And there are quite a few of these PSAs. Yeah, all of them show different scenarios, such as kids playing around train tracks, people stopping at the train tracks in their car having no way out, and even people trying to speed past the train tracks. All of the PSAs end with the people or cars wraith phasing when being hit by a train like it's Apex Legends or something. I feel like a lot of people know these PSAs and a lot of people talk about them. Not just in Australia, but worldwide in general. Francis the Firefly. This is a 90s PSA from the UK company Fire Kills. It's an animated short telling kids not to mess with matches. The PSA does this by showing the main character Francis being convinced by a cockroach to use a match. This is because Francis doesn't light up like the other Fireflies and wants to be like them. When Francis uses the match, he accidentally lights up his wings as well as the kingdom. After accidentally burning the kingdom, Francis meets with the king, where he gives us the reminder to never play with matches. Partnership for a Drug-Free America. An American company, which was founded in 1985, made so many memorable PSAs trying to tell people not to do drugs. The company made so many PSAs from well-known ones like Snake, This Is Your Brain on Drugs, Cleaning Girl, I Learned It By Watching You, to really weird, less well-known ones like Join the Party, Kiss, which literally has the band Kiss telling the viewer how bad drugs are and how bad they can be, Puppet Strings, Hooked on Crack, and I'm Not a Chicken. This company alone is probably the most well-known PSA company, as they've been made fun of and criticised ever since they came out, and some of them are remembered for the impact that they had on everyone. Concerned Children's Advertisers. This is a Canadian company that made plenty of PSAs throughout the 90s and early 2000s. Their PSAs try to educate children about many different topics, ranging from drug use to staying fit and healthy. CCA's most well-known PSAs, as you may know, are Hip Choice, House Hippo, and Don't Put It in Your Mouth. The company with their PSAs are quite mixed, as some of the PSAs are actually really good, and some of them are just really strange and bizarre. A good example of a weird PSA is Head and Body. They're quite light-hearted, but they're just strange. Greenpeace. Another Canadian company? Well, for the longest time I thought they were from the UK, as Greenpeace in the UK is mostly pumping out all the company's PSAs. But Greenpeace as a company was actually formed in Vancouver, and the company was made to preserve the lives of animals. The company's most well-known PSAs is Everything's Not Awesome, as I remember this one being everywhere when the LEGO Movie came out. If you didn't know, the PSA released around the time the LEGO Movie did because Greenpeace didn't want them to continue their partnership with Shell. But why did Greenpeace want LEGO to end their partnership with Shell? Well, it's because Shell has been polluting the oceans with oil and killing sea life because of oil spills. I feel like Greenpeace is talked about quite a lot, so they're not really obscure at all. The Pirates Are Out to Get You. This classic PSA from the UK company Fact was released in 2002. It follows a man as he's burning a bunch of DVDs and VHS tapes, as the narrator tells us that the pirates are out to get you. The narrator goes on about piracy effects and it may have effects on industries and encourages terrorism. People that know about this PSA meme on it hard, as it isn't a good PSA in the slightest. Mr. T. This 80s PSA from the Just Say No campaign from America shows, well, Mr. T. which he's known for doing many different movies and TV shows such as Rocky 3 and The A-Team. He talks to the viewer about how kids using drugs makes him mad and that it turns his stomach. Mr. T keeps on talking about how drugs hurt so many people, plus he starts to harass us about it and even shake us violently until we're on the ground. Plus, I love it how the camera ends up being on the ground looking up, that we have to see 3 older people just looking at the camera like we did something wrong. What world do these people live in? I bet they're just like secret reptilian people. They don't act like normal people in their slightest. Pablo the Mule Dog. Pablo the Mule Dog is a series of PSAs from the 2010s from the company Frank in the UK. The PSAs in question tried to show the darker side of cocaine by showing a dead dog that people smuggle cocaine in. There are quite a few of these PSAs, but they're just extremely bizarre, and I don't really think they're that obscure because JonTron brought them to light with his drug PSA video a few years ago. ACC Think Safe NZ. A New Zealand series of PSAs from the early 2000s is a whole campaign around making sure people are safe around the house. All these PSAs have the same kind of formula where it starts off lighthearted, presenting itself as an advertisement for a fake product, until the main character falls into or off something, such as falling into a table, falling off a ladder, and falling down the stairs. Human Ball. This is a Belgian PSA from the Doctors Without Borders. It's an animated short where a man starts rolling after falling over and more people get caught in his rolling ball. The whole PSA is a metaphor for the spread of AIDS, and the PSA ends with the ball being massive, rolling over heaps of people in the city. Also, the end text tells us that everyone should have access to treatment. Scavengers. Scavengers is a PSA released in 1987 from the company Lynx. The whole PSA follows a fly flying around the city until it gets into a room with a bunch of rich people. When the fly gets in the room, the camera keeps switching back and forth from the fly's perspective to the rich people. We then see the fly nibble on something until a rich couple pulls back the fur coat, where we see a bunch of guts underneath the coat with heaps of flies and maggots on it. The PSA ends with the text, by the way, in the Wiggles font, saying when animals are killed for their fur, 2 kinds of scavengers move in. The difference is the flies don't know better. Mighties. A 2007 PSA from the company TAWAFS in the UK shows a burnt up man with flames coming off his head as he talks to the viewer. He's talking to the viewer about how he loves people and he loves to be around them. The man goes on to talk about how he's drawn to certain things and that he can't help himself. He then finally introduces himself as Fire 20 seconds into the PSA, and the PSA ends with Fire telling us to be careful near him as he can't help himself. Smurfs. This is a 2005 UNICEF PSA from Belgium that was actually approved by the Smurfs creator Peo's family. I don't know why I thought it was the creator that approved this PSA because the creator of the Smurfs passed away 13 years before this PSA released. The PSA centers around Smurf Village getting bombed and the whole village turning into a war zone. This PSA in particular didn't air until after 9 PM to avoid children from seeing the PSA. Fair enough, as if a child saw it, they would be traumatized for life and they would not want to see anything Smurfs related again. Besides that, there isn't really much to say about this PSA. Welcome to the Battery. Welcome to the Battery is a UK PSA released in 1988 from the company Compassion in World Farming, or CIWF for short. The PSA follows a man talking to the viewer with a black background. He talks about how you're being put into a system with cages and lanes and that they're made for your safety. The man goes on to talk about how they're going to remove your teeth and nails to reduce the possibility of cannibalism. He then tells us that this whole system's completely legal and that you're a part of one of the most cost-effective systems. We then see that chickens are being put into these systems and that it's happening with your approval. The PSA ends the line, welcome to the Battery. Montana Meth Project. This company is a well-known anti-meth organization that started in 1999. They've released a lot of anti-meth PSAs throughout the 2000s and have made a lot of PSAs. Montana Meth Project's PSAs were shown to be quite effective when they started, as the company was doing other things compared to other PSA companies. What they did with their PSAs is they showed more of the disgusting things that meth could do to you instead of trying to completely scare kids. But they definitely did try and scare viewers from time to time. The company does have some great PSAs, but also some really weird PSAs I've talked about before. WSIB. A Canadian organisation that focuses around making PSAs about being safe in the workplace, with their most well-known PSA definitely being Top Chef. WSIB made most of their PSAs in 2007, but did release one singular PSA in 2009. But besides those 7 PSAs, there have never been any others from the company. It's really strange that the company came in 2007, released 6 PSAs, made one more in 2009, so they only made 7 PSAs and completely dipped, but they're still remembered for the Top Chef PSA. RSPCA. A British company that has released some PSAs over time was made to try and help animals find homes and get out of dangerous households. The company started making PSAs around the late 80s all the way up till the 2010s. Their most well-known PSA is definitely How Much Is That Dog in the Window, which is known for being absolutely insane in its approach. If you all don't know, there is RSPCA from the UK, as well as RSPCA from Australia. And if you ask me, RSPCA from Australia is much better, and I will explain why. The reason why is because the UK RSPCA PSAs try to scare the viewer or shock them without giving the viewer much information. RSPCA in Australia, on the other hand, only has one PSA that actually tries to scare the viewer, and besides from that, the PSAs are actually just light-hearted and trying to tell the viewer how you can help animals or educate the viewer about different things you can do with animals. Shoeboxes. Shoeboxes is a PSA from the company Africa Ronda Relief Appeal, released in 1995. In this PSA, we see footage of African children walking around or upset, as the PSA tells us that they know that we hate giving money, so please send us your shoeboxes. After that said, we see dead people all over the ground and more text fades in saying we're running out of coffins. Yeah, this PSA isn't really obscure at all, as I think even people that aren't really into PSAs have probably seen this PSA at least once or twice. Sunday lunch. This 2006 PSA made by the South Wall Council shows a family having lunch at a table. Everything seems alright and good, until the mother pulls out a gun and shoots the younger son in the head. Just scare the shit out of the viewer like that, I guess. The whole family's horrified as you can hear them and see them crying. Text fades in as you hear them still crying, saying if you keep quiet about gun crime, it's like pulling the trigger yourself. Photograph. The Scottish PSA from the company Scotland Against Drugs was released in 1996. The PSA shows a teenager in a photograph slowly deteriorating over time. The teenager deteriorates more and more over time, with segments of video showing the teen stressing out popping up as well. The teen basically melts like he's the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz, as the photo slowly fades to black. The whole PSA is meant to be a metaphor for drug use and how it can just completely destroy your life. Faroe Islands. Faroe Islands is a British PSA from the Whale and Dolphin Conservation, which was released in 1989 and has Anthony Hopkins narrating the PSA. This PSA is an animated short that uses paintings for its animation, and I quite like it actually. The narrator tells the story of the Faroe Islands, where people from far and wide come to the islands to kill and cut up the whales for them all to eat. When the people in the story kill the whales and feed them to the people, the rest of the whales are left to rot on the beach. Natural Born Smoker and Baby. Both of these PSAs released in 1985 from the UK. They both follow weird looking natural born smokers as the narrator talks about the person, or in this case, the baby PSA, the baby itself. The natural born smoker PSA highlights the person, as the natural born smoker is not a real thing, and the baby PSA shows how the natural born smoker would actually raise a child. By the way, yes, the PSAs look like it's just stripped straight out of Blade Runner. Chase. This PSA released in 1998 from the UK, made by IFAW, follows the perspective of a fox walking around. The fox walks around different areas until it eventually starts getting chased by a dog. This is until the dog eventually finds the fox in a hole and drags it out. After that, we see photos of foxes mutilated because of fox hunting, and then text fades in to say, for pity's sake, ban fox hunting now. Game. Game is a PSA from the League Against Cruel Sports in the UK, which was released in 1989. We follow a man as he's getting on a horse about to go fox hunting, with the song A Hunting We Will Go playing in the background. He's ready, and then he starts hopping on his horse and he starts getting a bit too rowdy about it. Text about fox hunting keeps coming up as the man slowly gets more and more gross as he's trying to hunt foxes. This keeps on going on until we see that he's on a rocking horse as he passes out. And as that happens, text comes up saying, how do you get your kicks? Monsters. A 2012 PSA from the company Fragile Childhood in Finland tackles how children see their parents when intoxicated. The PSA follows a few different scenarios where children are with their parents and the children see them as something else and always something disturbing. We see children see their parents as a giant ugly rabbit, a grim reaper, a zombie, and even a clown, to name a few. The PSA ends with one kid seeing their father as a robber and they're putting a seatbelt on them. Text comes on saying, how did children see us when we've been drinking? Tier 2. Not well known. So this tier's for the PSAs that not that many people talk about, but still quite a few of PSA enthusiasts talk about. These PSAs are a bit more obscure than the last tier, but they're not quite obscure yet. This tier is basically the shallow waters of the iceberg. I Am Master. This is a PSA released in 1984 from the War Amputations of Canada. We follow a character called Astar living in a different world known as the Planet Danger, as he's trying to avoid serious dangers. The whole PSA actually looks pretty cool. It's got nice backgrounds and really good set design, and also it has someone in a suit flipping around on ropes trying to avoid getting hurt. This is until Astar's arm comes off, as they tell us that they can put their arm back on and we can't, so that you should play safe. Knobs in space. The weirdest PSA I've ever seen? Probably. Also an epilepsy warning for anyone that suffers with epilepsy, because there's a lot of flashing images and lights and stuff like that. So time code will be on the screen to skip to the next entry. But this PSA released in 1995 from the Terence Higgins Trust in the UK follows a ship that looks like yeah, it is what it's meant to be. Traveling through space and trying to enter a black hole. Very subtle. But the black hole keeps going away when the rocket's trying to go into them. We then see some more wild imagery. I just don't know what to say. That's until the man with the arrow shoots an arrow to reveal the condom. Great. So the ship puts it on and finally goes into a black hole as a Big Bang Theory flashes on screen. We then finally get the message that we should wear a condom. Told you this PSA is really weird. Biggie Bear PSAs. Biggie Bear is a series of PSAs from 2004 from South Africa made by the company Parents for Responsible Viewing. This series of PSAs used to be more obscure a couple of years ago, but as of the past 2 years they've started popping up more and more. But the company shows viewers different acts that shouldn't be shown to kids, which ties into their slogan for this campaign, which is "What is your child learning from television?" All three of the PSAs show some kind of illegal act, such as Biggie Bear killing Mr. Rabbit, Biggie Bear injecting Mr. Spotty with some kind of drug, honestly probably heroin, and even Biggie Bear forcing himself on Miss Pussycat. This is probably why the PSAs aren't as obscure anymore, because they're just so ridiculous and over the top, where Biggie Bear just all of a sudden starts doing illegal activities. Also, aren't the PSAs doing exactly what the company's trying to fight against? Not really a great way to get your message across. Texting PSAs. This is a series of PSAs released from the RSA in Ireland. There are two of these PSAs I could find, but they were both released in 2012 as they followed someone texting on their iPhone 1. That shit looks so whack. I can't believe people used phones like that 10 years ago. But both of these PSAs end with a jump scare of someone appearing in front of them as they were ahead of the person before they started texting. By the way, these PSAs don't really make much sense, since in the PSA we see the people about 20 meters away from when they show up a second later right in their face. It kinda makes sense for the kid with the bike, but the old woman 20 meters away for all of a sudden to be 1 second later right in his face. No. No logic there. Stay alert, stay safe. Stay Alert, Stay Safe is a series of PSAs released in Canada from the company SASS in 1989. They follow Bert and Gert teaching kids how to stay alert and stay safe in life situations. Honestly, the reason why these PSAs were created is just really depressing. Basically, these PSAs were made after someone's 11-year-old daughter got kidnapped and murdered in 1986. It's just really depressing that some horrible event is what made these series of PSAs become a thing. MTV PSAs. Most of you probably have no idea that MTV actually made PSAs, and yeah, I did talk about these PSAs before in the past. But basically, the MTV PSAs are not from America, they are mainly from the UK and Italy. The PSAs came out around the 2000s. I could find about 6 of the PSAs, but only talk about a few today. One of the MTV PSAs follows a couple in a cornfield making out and eventually start going at it until a corn harvester. Yes, I found out what that machine's called. Wow! But it runs them over as text pops up saying unprotected sex can be dangerous. Another PSA of theirs follows a man in a nightclub bathroom as he's trying to walk out of the bathroom. He ends up back in one of the toilets, continuing the same cycle over and over again until we see him stop behind a wall as text pops up saying 68% of drug users think they can always get out of it. The last one I'll talk about follows a few drunk people in the back of cabs around Christmas time as they're acting like idiots. The people in these PSAs make themselves look terrible as they're obviously very drunk, and the PSA ends with the text "real idiots drive themselves home," obviously telling people not to drink and drive. Train. A 2007 PSA from Ad Cancel in America is all about global warming. The PSA depicts a man on a train track as the train's approaching. He's talking to the viewer about global warming and how the irreversible consequences are 30 years away. Which, by the way, it's 15 years away now. This PSA released 15 years ago. He then goes on to say that it won't affect him as he walks away. A little girl standing behind him on the tracks as the train's about to run the little girl over. Text comes up to say that there's still time to fight global warming. Before it's too late. Before It's Too Late, a PSA released in the 2010s made by the Ministry of Health in South Korea. The PSA tries to show you that you should stop smoking before it's too late to stop smoking. We get shown that smoking is difficult when he's a normal guy, and then it shows him in a hospital saying it's going to be harder to quit now. The PSA ends with the text, "Quitting smoking is difficult, but it'll be harder if you don't hang up." Chopper. This is a PSA that has the convicted Aussie criminal Mark Brandon Reed, or as he's known Chopper, talking to the viewer. This series of PSAs was released in 2001 from the Pedestrian Council of Australia, and Chopper's talking to the viewer about killing. Well, to be precise about that, he's talking about how you are no different to him if you kill someone when drink driving. There are 2 or 3 of these PSAs, and they all follow the same format where Chopper's sitting at the table talking to the viewer. I find it interesting how they used a well-known Aussie criminal to get their point across that if you kill someone when you're drinking and driving, that you're basically the same as them. Everybody knows. A PSA from the company Quitline in Australia released in 2008. The whole PSA is basically a compilation of other PSA clips as well as their own clips, kind of showing how much smoking can affect people. The song Everybody Knows from Leonard Cohen is playing over these images that we see in the PSA. Also, with Quitline borrowing footage from other PSA companies, we gotta hope they actually got legal rights to use that footage in their own PSA. Have a Smoke. Have a Smoke's a PSA from the Ministry of Health in Poland, but it was released in the year 1999, and it follows someone as they light a match to have a cigarette. But the PSA then has a nice little subtle transition to a candle at a grave, symbolizing that if you have a smoke, you'll end up dying. Star Wars PSAs. There are quite a few of these PSAs that aired during the late 70s, early 80s. One of them, which takes place in the iconic Mos Eisley bar, is a part of the Friends Don't Let Friends Drive Drunk campaign from the US Department of Transport, which is wild. If you didn't know, this campaign was probably the most well-known car safety PSA campaign up until Vince and Larry came along. There's another one where R2's smoking a cigarette just to look cool, I guess, and another one about child immunization. They're weird PSAs, but I feel like the smoking PSA gets talked about the most out of these 3. Play safe. This is a PIF from the UK made in 1978. It's 10.5 minutes long and it's all about how kids should be playing safe. We get to see examples of kids hurting themselves by playing in dangerous areas, such as a boy with a kite hitting a power line and kids trying to retrieve a frisbee from an electric substation. It does have segments in the actual public information film where 2 owls talk to each other about the scenarios that happen to get their message across to kids, I guess. Heaven Can Wait. A 2002 PSA from the company Axion in Belgium centers around a few guys in a car crash in a tree. All the people in the car seem to be dead until we see the spirits of all the people start to rise. The spirits go to the sky except for the passenger that kept his seatbelt on because his spirit goes back into his body. After the spirit's back, he wakes up to his friends dead in the car. The PSA ends with the text, Heaven Can Wait, belt up. DOE. DOE is an infamous company from Ireland that makes PSAs about the dangers of driving, if it's drink driving, speeding, or anything else. The company's most famous PSA by far is the Shame on You PSA. This one PSA is why the company is so infamous. The PSA is so bad and extreme that it blew up everywhere when it came out, and it's still talked about today. Shame on You is meant to be disturbing, but the end is just straight up hilarious for how fake and far-fetched it is. But the company has released some good PSAs like Shame. Consumer Safety Institute. A company from the Netherlands that make PSAs about several different topics. Some of their most well-known PSAs are Stadium Fire, Eye Candy, and Rocket. Stadium Fire shows real footage of a stadium fire next to a lit cigarette to show the viewer how the spread of fire is unpredictable, and that you should always be prepared. Eye Candy is a PSA where they make inedible things look like delicious things because kids can't tell the difference between inedible food and real food. In the PSA Rocket, a kid's lighting up fireworks as the narrator talks about what the character's doing. The narrator ends up asking what they're doing wrong as the rocket falls over and hits the girl. Text comes in to say to secure bottles by filling them with sand or water, and that windy weather conditions increase accident rates by 48%. DETR. DETR is a company from the UK that made PSAs in 1999. Their PSAs follow a few different perspectives in a car crash. The company released 4 PSAs all in the same year, in which 3 of them focus around the person that caused the car crash, and the other PSA, titled Michael Joy, yeah, I'm not making that mistake again, no, focuses around the victim's parents. All the PSAs are quite the same, where the PSA asks people a question. These PSAs just play out the natural responses each of the people have in their respective PSAs. My personal favourite is the Mike and Joy PSA, but they're all really good. TAC. This is an Australian company known as the Transport Accident Commission. They try to prevent car accidents from happening. TAC are known for their PSAs covering many different topics about driving, such as drunk driving, driving on drugs, and speeding, to name a few. The company's PSAs are pretty well known in the PSA community, as they do make some really good PSAs, but some of them aren't that well known. TAC has been around since 1987 and still makes PSAs to this day. Devil. A PSA released in 1999 from the company Smokeline in Norway follows a man that's meant to be the devil talking to the camera. The devil asks if there's any smokers and lists a few facts about smoking, like how 50% of smokers die from smoking. He then decides to flip a coin to decide which 50% of people die, and after he flips the coin, he looks at the coin and just laughs. Made in Taiwan. This PSA from the UK, made by the company EIA, was released in 1995. The PSA shows a group of rhinos on a TV as a narrator comes in to talk about the species of animals and that they're almost the last of their species. Then blood starts shooting out the side of the TV, and the narrator talks about how rhinos are being hunted and exploited only in Taiwan because it's the only country that hasn't made hunting rhinos illegal. Summer Holiday. Summer Holiday is an Aussie PSA released in the year 2000 from the company RTA. The PSA follows a family about to go on a holiday as we see the family pack in the car and getting ready to go on their holiday as their older son records with his camera. The family then gets on the road as the boy is just recording random things such as a man on a boat and his younger brother. This is until when he's eating a lolly, the family gets into a car crash and the boy's face ends up in front of the camera as text fades in saying 2 people died every day on the holidays. Exploding Tiger Trick. This PSA from 1996 made by the company EIA in the UK. In this PSA, we see some kind of magic trick where a magician puts a tiger in the box. The narrator talks about how India made a reserve to protect the remaining tigers, the national symbol of their country. The magician puts the tiger in the box, and as he stabs swords into the box, the tiger's screaming. We see blood coming out of the box, and the narrator comes back to say that 1 tiger is killed every day, and that if this continues, there'll be none left. When the narrator finishes, the magician opens the box to only see blood all over the box, but no tiger. Text comes up saying to tell the Indian government that you don't want the tiger to disappear. Toy Gun. A PSA from Scotland that ended in 2009 made by the company Safer Scotland. It starts off with the doll and text showing up to say that it's a toy doll, and then a gun showing up with more text saying toy gun with a question mark at the end. It goes back to the toy doll and the gun shoots off half the doll's face with blood gushing all out of the doll's face. Which is really strange, but hey, I guess it gets its message across. And it ends with the text saying an air gun is not a toy. NSPCC. This is a British company out to protect children from any kind of dangers. NSPCC started making PSAs around the 90s, which are mostly about child abuse and child sexual abuse, and still make PSAs to this day. The company's PSAs, if they are recent or not, are always quite remembered amongst the PSA community. But to be fair, NSPCC I honestly can't think of one bad PSA of theirs, because they all deliver their message across quite well. C. C is a company from the Netherlands that released quite a few fireworks PSAs around the 90s and 2000s. Their most well-known PSAs definitely Countdown, Shadow Puppets, and Sign Language. These PSAs are known for scaring the shit out of the viewer. The most well-known out of them is definitely Countdown, where their hands lose fingers as they're counting down from 10. These PSAs are honestly quite solid, especially a PSA like Shadow Puppets with a slow build-up. I like that slow build-up to the eventual big reveal at the end of the PSA. I think it really works really damn well in this PSA in particular. Partnership for a Drug-Free Singapore. This is a well-known company for making anti-drug PSAs throughout the 90s. Their most well-known PSAs are Rats, Blender, and by far the most popular PSA of theirs, You're the Guinea Pig. The company is known for making disturbing anti-drug PSAs, and they do it extremely well. You're the Guinea Pig wouldn't be a favourite of mine if it wasn't a good PSA. Boiled Bear, anyone? Boiled Bear Anyone is a British PSA from the company Tux Force, released in 1996, and all we see is text on the screen for a recipe on how to boil a bear. As the text coming up, we hear audio of the bear being boiled alive as people are trying to cook the bear to eat it. A narrator comes in at the end of the PSA to say bears are considered a gourmet food in the Far East, despite the fact that that species is endangered and close to extinction. Kitchen Mother. This is a Japanese PSA released in 1982 from the Japanese government public relations. We follow a mother pass out on the table as their child's crying next to them. Narrator comes in to say that recently stimulant drugs are destroying housewives, young people, and salaried workers. The PSA then shows the mother using a needle to inject themselves with some kind of drugs as they fade out of the shot. We only see the child crying as the narrator comes in. However, not only you will destroy yourself, your family will also be destroyed. Text fades in saying, let's expel stimulant drugs from everyone. Stop. A PSA from the company Transport Safety in Australia, released in 1997. The PSA follows a family in a car with 2 young girls are singing Oh My Don't Know How to Farm. Then things turn bad as the man's speeding around the corner and everything just stops. The PSA is quite disturbing as the outcome of this situation is pretty bloody and we hear the little girl crying after the accident, which definitely doesn't help. Baby Monitor. Baby Monitor is a South African PSA released in 2003 from the company Women Against Child Abuse, and it shows a mother listening to a baby monitor where a partner sexually abuses their child. The mother starts to cry as she hears this happening. As this is happening, a narrator comes in to say if you don't stop him from raping her, who will? Tentacle. A German PSA released in 2008 by the company Dunkelziffer. The PSA tackles the long-term effects of child sexual abuse by using a tentacle as a metaphor for the events that the main character remembers. We follow the young girl with a tentacle staying on her as she grows up. She keeps on getting older and older, and the tentacle stays with her until she's an old woman that eventually passes away. The tentacle then finally leaves when she passes away, as the text fades in saying if sexually abused children never get the help they need, they'll never outgrow their trauma. Torture by Another Name. This 2007 PSA released by the Helen Barmer Foundation in the UK depicts a woman in bed talking to the viewer about two different people, presumably her before and her now, whilst getting sexually abused. The two perspectives keep switching back and forth, showing how bad of a situation she's in now being trafficked for sex. The PSA ends with her turning on her back, and the text women enslaved by sex trafficking lose more than just their names comes up. Wheel of Misfortune. Wheel of Misfortune's a PSA from New Zealand released in 2008 from the NZTA. This PSA is quite interesting as we see a few different scenarios of cars trying to get past intersections. At each of the intersections is an older man sitting next to a giant wheel that determines the outcome of the scenario. There are quite a few of these PSAs, and even one of them where it shows the man next to a giant wheel at every intersection, and it's wild. The one thing I really like about these PSAs is that most of them are disturbing, but there's one PSA that actually throws a curveball at the viewer, where at the end of the PSA they end up landing on the miracle, which is actually a part of the wheel. There is one little space where you can land on a miracle. Tier 3, Obscure. This is where we start to get into some obscure PSAs. This is the PSAs I really don't see many people talk about or even remember. Some are for good reasons and some really aren't for good reasons at all, so let's just get into Tier 3. Sexual Violence. This series of 2016 PSAs are animated shorts about ending sexual violence. So they created a world that's only full of birds and bees to talk about sexual violence. Birds and bees, I get it. The PSAs aren't terrible or anything, they're honestly just strange. Carbon monoxide. So this 2014 PSA is from the gas networks in Ireland, and they use a CGI bird to sing a song about servicing your boiler. What's with anthropomorphic animals having to teach us lessons? By the way, the voice of the bird couldn't be more Irish, I swear. But there are quite a few of these PSAs just talking about how bad carbon monoxide is and the things you can do to prevent it from showing up. I really don't know what else to say. Keep kids from riding on top of trains. Believe it or not, this is a PSA from Russia of all places. But the PSA was released sometime in the 2010s, and it's an animated short of characters injuring themselves or dying when riding on top of trains. There isn't much info about these PSAs at all, and I was even surprised I managed to get a copy of this PSA, but they are in a few PSA compilations. Go Electric. A Canadian PSA from 1984 made by the company Ontario Hydro shows a furnace that has a face and talks. But the furnace is singing about how it's going to make oil bills rise as a narrator comes in to tell the viewer that they should be switching to an electric furnace to save money on their bills. The PSA ends with the text Go Electric coming up. 20 Seconds. 20 Seconds is a PSA from Australia released in 2011 by the company Play It Safe by the Water. PSA follows this one angled shot from the pool's level as the child jumps in the pool and the timer starts. The timer keeps on going, and around the 17-second mark, a narrator comes in to mention that it takes 20 seconds for a toddler to drown, and you should never take your eyes off children around water. Alice Gun Safety PSA. This is a very weird and interesting PSA, and it's just one of those PSAs that I could never believe to be true. It's just so weird and strange that I can't believe it's actually real. I do see some people talk about this PSA, and I would surprisingly consider it obscure. It's basically a gun safety PSA where Alice ends up finding a gun in a cabinet and accidentally shooting herself. Computer. A 2006 PSA from the company DVLA in the UK shows a man going back home from work. It starts with him going into his car in the car park as he follows his journey home, and the whole PSA is shot like a horror film with a mysterious black rectangle following him. By the way, this whole PSA is just about avoiding registration. Like, yeah, legit, this whole horror movie aesthetic PSA is about avoiding registration, which I don't actually see many people talk about this PSA either. Maggots. This is a weird PSA released in 1996 from the Arizona Department of Health Services. The PSA is meant to show us how gross it is to smoke by juxtaposing a lady smoking in the bathroom with a grey girl with maggots in her teeth smoking. The grey girl's spitting out maggots and shit whilst whimsical music's playing in the background, which it's quite strange. SWR. A company from Germany that actually stands for Südwestrundfunk is a broadcasting station that broadcasts radio and TV stations. They were founded in 1998, but actually started making PSAs in 1999 and made PSAs all throughout the early 2000s. Their most well-known PSAs are Day Trip, Amok, and Nightmare. Day Trip is by far their most well-known PSA, and I've talked about this one a lot before, where a father and son walk around a city and see disturbing things. PSAs like Amok are just really offensive, and don't give SWR a good image at all. The PSA tries to make the Columbine school shooting into a video game to say that video games cause school shootings. In my opinion, SWR has not made a single good PSA. Day Trip's an alright PSA, but it's not a good one. Corpse. This is an Aussie PSA released in the 2000s from the company ORS. We follow a few people speeding and swerving in and out of lanes and stuff as their bodies slowly turn into corpses. I don't really see many people talk about this PSA, but it is quite interesting how they turn into corpses, and the corpses look like the corpses in the Adidas Korn music video. Impacts. Impacts is a PSA from the Denmark company Danish Road Safety Council, released in 1999. We follow a doctor that's talking in Danish, talking to us about how badly you can get hurt after car accidents at certain speed limits. He makes comparisons such as a 30km/h crash being compared to a very serious sports injury. At the end of the PSA, we see that at 50km/h, it's basically a job for the people downstairs. Vivisected. A PSA from 1990 from the company Thames Television in the UK shows a rat being vivisected. A narrator comes in to ask what rats eat, and we actually get to see what kind of things rats eat, such as chip packets and stuff like that. The narrator then says rats spread disease, and the more litter we have, the more rats there will be, as we see a rat cut open. The hostage. This PSA is from the French company In France et Partage, was released in 2006. Yes, I know, I'll probably butcher that, don't worry. The PSA reenacts a domestic violence situation where the mother slaps her son, and then the father whips his son with a belt. The big twist comes at the end of the PSA when really it's showing how the whole PSA is an exaggeration, because in reality it was a 6-year-old child being abused. Tier 4. Extremely obscure. Even more obscure now. I don't really see anyone talk about these PSAs at all, unless you dig hard enough to actually find it, which, good luck. But these aren't the most obscure PSAs quite yet. Nah. Mascaras. I hadn't heard of this PSA until I found it in the disturbing PSAs Iceberg. In this PSA, we see a man laughing with a mask on, symbolizing someone enjoying an alcoholic drink. And then keeps on going on where the mask keeps drinking and laughing, but the music starts to speed up more and more, until the man turns around and we see a sad face. The PSA ends with the happy and sad mask next to each other as the narrator speaks in Spanish. The narrator then roughly says that there are two faces of the same problem. When you drink alcohol in excess, alcohol ends up taking you. Alone. A 1993 PSA from the company AIDS Information Center in Japan shows an animation of a story about a man meeting someone. They both end up falling in love with each other, and then the partner gets AIDS and eventually dies from the disease. Well, that's the way I see the PSA. It's quite an interesting PSA, and it's yet another PSA I hadn't heard of until recently. Spider-Man, register to vote. Yeah, this PSA is real. There isn't much to say about this PSA besides Spider-Man telling you to vote. I see barely anyone talk about this PSA, as it is quite weird and strange. Kinda disturbing as well, with the ominous music and the darkness surrounding Spider-Man. The suit really doesn't do any favors either. Also, this character better show up in Across the Spider-Verse. Extreme Methover. Extreme Methover is a 2000s PSA from America, released by the company Drug Free Arizona, parodies the typical dating game shows. The whole PSA just looks like a 70s dating show, and has all flowers and stuff all over the set. The host tells us that meth will change your life as images show how meth changes your appearance, your arms, and your face. The PSA ends with a representative from the company talking to the viewer about how big of a threat meth really is. Superhero. A very bizarre PSA from the UK by the company NHS that was released in 2006. The PSA follows a party where someone accidentally lets go of their balloons. A superhero then emerges to retrieve the balloons that are stuck on a construction site about 4 floors up. The superhero climbs all the way up until he's just further than arm's reach away from the balloons. The superhero then slips and falls to his death as it's revealed to be just some drunk person. This PSA is kinda wild though, and look, I guess it does get its message across, but in a very, very strange way. Car Park. Car Park's a British PSA from the company Calm, released in 2006. The PSA follows a man in a car park as he seems to be going to work. We then see another man seemingly walk up to him. The man that got out of the car thinks that the other person's going to kill him, and as he comes up closer and closer, he gets frightened. Text then comes up saying that 3 men are killed in Britain every day. It cuts back to the man that was actually unharmed, as the other person just walked completely past them. But the men that walked past him ends up jumping off the side of the car park. Text fades in saying you can help stop suicide. De Heros a Zero. This PSA was released in the year 2000 by the Quebec company SAAQ, and it shows real footage of a car spinning off the road as it's going 200 kilometers an hour. Text fades in after the car spins off the road, that translates into English saying Matt Hayu died in April 14, 2000 after losing control of his vehicle at 200 kilometers an hour. This PSA is honestly quite depressing as it shows real footage of the car spinning off and flipping off the road. I find that shit really depressing. Don't let ice destroy you. An Aussie PSA released in the 2000s, which is from the Australian government. If you didn't know, the Australian government actually did release some PSAs themselves throughout the 90s and early 2000s. The PSA follows one doctor that talks about the effects of ice, while we see visual representations of what the drug can actually do to people. We see many different things, such as people digging their own skin, and even someone going nuts at a police station, legit headbutting one of the officers. Wedding. This is an Aussie PSA from the 2000s made by the adults surviving child abuse. PSA plays out the events of a father giving a speech at his daughter's wedding. Everything seems quite normal until he starts making jokes about the terrible things he's done to his daughter, and everyone laughs at what he's saying. This keeps on going on and on like it's a normal situation, until text fades in saying if only it was this easy to get over child abuse. For more than a million Australians it isn't. I can't feel it coming. I really don't think many people talk about this PSA at all from the UK-based company IFAW. The PSA released in the year 2009 and it parodies the well-known Cadbury commercial that has a gorilla play the drums. I don't know why Cadbury had a gorilla playing drums to try and sell chocolate, but that's besides the point. The PSA itself is talking about how a world without gorillas is closer than what we think, as they're all becoming endangered. Tier 5. Forgotten. This is the tier where I don't see anyone talk about these PSAs at all. These are some of the least talked about PSAs I have ever seen, and honestly, good luck finding anyone else that talked about these PSAs, because I don't think anyone has talked about these PSAs at all, and there might be one or two more obscure PSAs I missed out on, so let me know in the comments if there are. Why do you keep on running, boy? I don't know how to describe this PSA, besides basically saying it's a Britney Spears music video but about smoking. This shit is wild. This PSA follows a few different women singing a song about how men keep running away from them, and we see why because the women are all smoking, so that's why the men are running away. Honestly, just the approach of this PSA is extremely strange to me. Forest. Forest is a PSA that's pretty obscure, as I feel like I'm the only one that knows about this PSA or even remembers it at all. But this 2010 PSA from Why Do You Think follows a few businessmen in suits walking around a forest as they approach a man dressed up as a bunny. But the men in suits tell Bob the bunny that he has to leave because they own his home. As they tell Bob to leave, he runs up to one of the workers and knees him in the balls. As we hear the chainsaw starting up, Bob ends up running to an area of the forest already cut down. We hear Bob scream as a text comes up saying 1.5 million trees are cut down every year to make cigarettes. Honestly, for the longest time, I thought I made this PSA up in my head. But no, it's real. Venomosity PSAs. Yet another series of PSAs that I thought I dreamt up. But the PSA is released in 2011 from the Arizona Department of Health in America. All the PSAs follow people getting weird venom tentacles come out of them as a metaphor for a smoking addiction. As you do, but these PSAs are really strange. I remembered seeing one of the PSAs when they came out, and the shit is so weird. Meat belt. Probably the most meme-worthy PSA I've ever seen. This PSA is from the company Why Do You Think, and they use a thing called a meat belt as a metaphor for smoking and how ridiculous you look when you smoke. All I can say is that it would be kinda good having meat with me when I go out. Like, hey, you have a meat belt, just grab a piece of meat and fucking eat it? Hey, that'd be awesome. But yeah, this PSA is just extremely strange, and I just can't believe it was ever made. He-Man touching. This PSA released in the 80s in America, and it features the characters He-Man, She-Ra, and Orko from He-Man the Master of the Universe. They talk to the viewer about how you shouldn't let anyone touch your bunny in a way that you think's wrong. Orko wants to square up with anyone that wants to try it. Fair enough. But at least this PSA talks about how it might not be easy for a young person to admit that they've been touched in the wrong way. My question about this PSA is why use characters from He-Man and the Master of the Universe? I guess it was an 80s thing thanks to shows like G.I. Joe, but it doesn't need to be these characters getting the message across. But honestly, I don't see anyone talk about this PSA at all, and I can see why, as it's just a very bland and harmless PSA. So that is the obscure PSAs Iceberg. Please feel free to let me know your thoughts on this iceberg in the comments below, as I did create this iceberg myself. So, a new segment at the end of all of my videos is a shout out to my fellow patrons. Today's shout out is to Fatima and EB Agent J for supporting my Patreon at my $25 Top Chef tier, and also thanks to Madeline Stringer and Juliet Wakefield for supporting my $5 Pusher tier. If you want your name to show up at the end of my videos, then please make sure to check out my Patreon in the description, because for as little as $2 a month, your name could show up at the end of my videos. With that out of the way, if you enjoy this video, please make sure to give it a like, and also make sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy my content, as it really does help me out. And I shall catch you all in the next video.